Hey, howdy. I'm Darlene Marshall, host of the Better Than Fine podcast. And on this week's episode of the show, we have Dr. Leah Kaylor, who is the FBI's top sleep expert. And we had such a fun time diving deep on the psychological factors that impact our sleep, because so often we're out here talking about light, we're talking about supplements, but we're not really talking about what's going on under the hood. And she and I explored deep and wide about trauma, about mindset, about the ways in which we can be working toward better sleep from the inside out. It's a really fun episode. I hope you love it as much as I liked making it for you. Like, comment, subscribe, share. You know what to do. So let's get to it. Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, wellness coach, and well-being educator, Darlene Marshall. And over the last 5.5 years or so, I've taught a couple hundred corporate wellness workshops, mostly corporate. Some of them been private, but wellness workshops kind of across the board. And this year, more than any other year that I have been doing this work, I have been hearing over and over and over and over that people are really struggling with their sleep, that they know they need it, but it's difficult to get more. And then when they do actually fall asleep, they feel like the quality is not that great. And then they're struggling to stay asleep and they're struggling to fall asleep. And then once they're up, their head is going all over the place. And, in my sleep workshop, I like to point out to the participants that sleep is one, it's a drive, right? Just like hunger or thirst or sex, there's just certain things that our bodies need in order to function and definitely to function well. But unlike some of those other drives, sleep can be unique because it's one of the few drives that our physical bodies need that we can psych ourselves out of, that our mental state can impact. We can't outthink ourselves from being thirsty. We have to drink something. But I could get myself so emotionally upset that I won't be able to fall asleep. Or if I wake up in the middle of the night and I start telling myself, oh no, I've only got 3 more hours and I need this sleep, I got to get back to sleep right now, I can agitate myself out of being able to get good sleep. And that is why I'm so excited to share with you the perspective of today's guest. I think her qualifications are really unique, and I am very excited for her perspective. She's not just a sleep expert, but Dr. Leah Kaylor also holds a master's degree in forensic mental health counseling and a PhD in clinical psychology. So she's coming at this sleep thing from the psych angle, which I think so many of us are hearing now about supplements and apps and all of this stuff, when really it's an in your head inside job. She's one of the FBI's go-to people on sleep. And while so many of us know we need sleep, even when we want sleep, we're struggling to get sleep, some of that's in our head, and Dr. Leah is here to help us out. So Dr. Leah Kaylor, welcome to Better Than Fine.
Hi, thanks for having me. What an introduction. Wow. Excited
Well,
to be
you
here with
deserve
you.
a wow. You deserve a wow with credentials like yours. I'm excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So we've set the table for at least what I'm observing this year, but really in the last 10 years of conversations with clients, I feel like the conversation about sleep has really changed, where 10 years ago, I was trying to convince clients that it actually mattered. And now I feel like people have gotten that message, but then they're struggling with the doing as opposed to the thinking. I'm muddling my own words. Anyway, what are you seeing? Do you agree that that's where the struggle's at right now? And what are your insights to set the table for us?
So I work with first responders, with agents, with a lot of veterans and military. So I would say that I am where you were about 10 years ago, about trying to convince people that sleep is important, which is why I wrote the book, If Sleep Were a Drug. And just because I feel like I keep saying the same thing over and over and over again and trying to convince people that it's important. But I would agree with you that I do think it's becoming more and more trendy on the outside, whenever I say the outside, maybe like the community, civilians, people who are not in the first responder or like military umbrella, who are kind of realizing, oh, okay, maybe there is something to this. Maybe if I do this right, this will help me. And so I've been trying to get the word out just everywhere that I possibly can, because at the end of the day, sleep is sleep. Everybody sleeps. Everybody has to sleep, as you mentioned. And for the most part, it doesn't change that much across the board. We all go through light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep, unless, of course, you've got a sleep disorder. But it really, truly is so important. And, I just put out a book called If Sleep Were a Drug, and it's really to get people thinking of, wow, like if it was, gosh, what would that look like? What would that, like, I think people would be so much more willing to prioritize it if you could just pop a pill and that was sleep.
Yeah, well, and subtitle, right? If the sleep were a drug, subtitle, you couldn't afford it, right? Like
Yeah.
it would be so valuable.
Yes.
And thank you for calling me out, because I think I take for granted that the type of client that tends to seek me out has done enough poking around online or listened to the show that they have at least heard the message that it matters. But point, that doesn't mean that everybody has. So give us your stump speech. What would you tell? Because I alluded to this, but you do sleep at the FBI. Like you are talking about the highest levels of human performance and expectation for cognitive performance. So give us your stump speech. If I'm an agent being like, I'll sleep when I'm dead, you tell them.
Well, to get you to the grave a lot quicker is what I tell them. Whenever I'm talking to either my first responders or like my military personnel, it does have to be almost a little bit of like a scare tactic-y. Sure. And I don't necessarily love that, but at the same time, I'm not above it, because if you really understand what is happening during sleep, what should be happening, what are all the very important functions for your cognitive health, for your mental health, for your physical health, then maybe you would prioritize it. But there's also an element too, and I think this is why when I wrote this book, and I think specifically about the populations that I've worked with, sometimes it is sleep, but oftentimes sleep is what we see on the outside, but underlying it or underneath of it is oftentimes, and you've alluded to this already, is underlying anxiety, depression, stress, trauma. And so it's very multifaceted. So as you were talking about, like, well, what do I do? I'm very, very lucky to have an incredible clinical toolkit where I help people with their sleep. I do a lot of one-on-one education, and a lot of the techniques that I do with people, I've put them in the book now. But I also help people work with those underlying issues that maybe they don't realize is what's causing the sleep issues, but it is. And so a few of my very favorite tools that I use are EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and then brain spotting. Those are some of my very favorite techniques to help people both in the daytime and the nighttime, like working all these pieces together.
Okay, you just gave me like 5 rabbit holes I want to run down.
Yes.
So we got to rewind the tape, but we're gonna put a pin in EMDR and brain spotting, because it's something we haven't talked about on the show before. I'm sure not all of our listeners know what it is, and I really want you to unpack it for us, but I got to put a pin in it. Okay. Because I want to talk about motivation for just a second, because you alluded to this when you were talking about your agents and your first responders and your military personnel. I'm not above the scare tactics. And I think it's really important to talk about motivation when we talk about behavior change, right? So we just had Katie Bowman on the show a few weeks ago, and she was talking about in her book what she calls core values. I don't know if you know Katie's work. She is the founder of Nutritious Movement. Oh, you'd love her. You'd love her. And in that episode, we were talking about what we refer to on the show as what matters most. Right? Whether we're talking about core values or your primary motivators, or like, what do you actually care about? And let that be what drives change. And so, I would imagine that some of your agents, they do care about longevity, and some of them care about performance, right? If we're talking about special forces, we're talking about military, first responder, and, just like literal physical performance, whatever it is. Avoidance motivation is powerful in the short term, right? So if it's like, it sure is, this is going to shorten your lifespan, this is going to shorten your health span, this is going to shorten your effectiveness, that's still a big motivator. So I'm glad you're not above it. And to your point, I think the point you were making at the time is that we also want those positive longer term motivators too. So if you
Right.
want to add anything to that, but I just think it's really worth calling into our listener that don't be above it, but also like, yes, and it, what actually matters to us. Right.
And going along with that too, as a psychologist, I think a lot about the stages of change and kind of like the pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, maintenance, and then potentially relapse. And so whenever I'm thinking about folks, maybe they don't know that sleep is important, just like what you're talking about. Like for a long time, nobody was talking about it. I think we still have such a dearth of people talking about it. I think that that's why I've become the FBI sleep guru. Like they hired a psychologist and it just so happened that I had sleep experience, and it just so happened that so many people are sleeping poorly that, that has risen to the top. Not that I have like a cool title like sleep guru or anything cool like that. That's not actually
We'll
what my
come up with
paychecks say. I will take it up to the top. So with that, I think about like the scare tactics, but also you might be in this pre-contemplation stage where you don't even know that there's a problem. And I think that just comes down to like education, right? Like maybe we don't even know how many hours of sleep an average adult needs, or maybe you think, well, I'm functioning just fine. And that's a big part of what I do is I pull out the research and say, well, no, actually you're not. And here's the research to show that. And they think, oh, well, I'm functioning just great on 4 hours. And I'm like, well, actually, no, I really don't think that you are. And here's the research to show you.
Into it.
Yes. And then to bring them into the contemplation stage where they're starting to think, well, maybe I would be interested in making some change. And then hopefully eventually bringing them into the action stage. And so it's a process. It really, really is. But that's, for anything.
I so value that you unpacked that, right? Stages of change. People might know it as a trans-theoretical model of change. Of just working on some new behavior change stuff for NASM, for our podcast network owner. And as I was massaging my way through, one of the things, how I'm sure you have this experience, you revisit research periodically through your course of your career, you're working on something, you go back, you reread, and the thing that jumped out to me this time that I'm sure that I read before, but it didn't like glom on and stick in the same way that it resonated today, was specifically on the way that at different stages we need different things to support us. And so recognizing that it's a process, recognizing that that process starts with awareness. I know right now I feel like we're in a phase where there's a lot of people out there being like hating on wearables and like, oh, we don't need them. And I'm like, oh, for the number of clients and family members that I have gotten to just try it. Just try it and see it. Yeah. And then the light bulb goes off of like, oh, my nervous system didn't relax at all last night. They think of it as like my stress didn't shut off, but whatever language we use.
Yeah.
And meeting ourselves where we are, or our clients for patients and whomever, to allow it to be a process instead of expecting it to be a light switch.
That, and I think what you're alluding to too is like this awareness. And, I keep coming back to the book, but that's also how I think about the stages of change of, maybe you heard me talk, or maybe you're hearing me talk on this podcast and you're not thinking that sleep is valuable at all. And you're about to skip this episode. And then maybe you sit down and listen, and maybe it needs to simmer for a little while. And that's what happens with some folks, is that they're not ready to make change just yet, but you know where to find me whenever you are ready to make that change. And I made it easy. I put it all down in a book for you.
She made it easy for us. All in a book. So we put a pin. We're going to come back to our pin.
Okay.
For those who have never heard the alphabet soup that we just unraveled for them.
Yep.
And they're like, oh yeah, it's an inside job. Sleep is my sleep issues are, rumination, their anxiety, their trauma that I did a bunch of therapy and I feel like it's pretty good, but I still don't sleep that great. What are EMDR and brain spotting?
Yeah. I'm glad that you asked, because I think EMDR is becoming more trendy, but interestingly enough, it was founded back in the 80s. So just to give a little bit of history, Francine Shapiro is the individual who discovered EMDR. And essentially what had happened was she's in her doctoral program to become a psychologist. She gets this diagnosis of cancer. She's very distressed, and she goes on this infamous walk in the park. And this is kind of where it all starts of, she is distressed. She's walking on this path and her eyes are moving back and forth. She's scanning this path as she's walking, and she's thinking about this distressing diagnosis. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And after she gets done on this walk, she realizes that eventually she does feel a little bit better, at least better than she did when she started this walk. And she thinks, okay, interesting, there must be something to this. And she has a lab. Again, she's training to be a psychologist, so she brings people into the lab and asks them to think about something that's distressing to them. And she moves her fingers back and forth across the visual field, and she asks that person to think about what's distressing and to watch her fingers. And she also finds that when she does this with people, that their distress level goes down as they are watching her fingers move back and forth. And she's just thinking, like, what is this? Like, what's going on? Like, what have I stumbled across? And, you know, there's a lot of different theories and ideas behind how EMDR works. And there's also so much about the brain and the mysteries of the brain and the wonder that it is, that we don't know everything that there is to know. And that's kind of where the magic of EMDR happens, is kind of in this middle ground here of the theories and the mystery of the brain and just how it works. But nonetheless, that we know that it does work. I became certified in EMDR several years ago now, and it has rapidly been one of my very favorite tools because it's very quick. It's very effective. It is very research-based and heavily embedded in the science. It's one of the most well-researched trauma therapy techniques out there, but it doesn't have to be used exclusively with trauma. There's a lot of different things that you can do it for. But again, in my world of first responders, that's typically the reason why I'm bringing that tool out of my toolkit. But to give you a little bit more information about what's happening, essentially is what we know, or what we think that we know, is that the left side of the brain, or the left hemisphere, controls the right side of the body. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. And when we're doing something to activate both sides, such as watching the eyes move back and forth, or there's a couple of other different ways that you can do it, but that's called bilateral stimulation. When you're activating both hemispheres of the brain, you are getting them both to talk to each other, essentially. And what we're doing is, it's in the name, we're kind of reprocessing. So whatever it is that has happened to you is still part of your life story. It's still part of who you are. However, what we're doing is making it a little bit easier to deal with, or maybe to think about it in a more adaptive way. And I'm going to give you my first responder example of, you know, we're working, we're at a scene. Unfortunately, we lose the person, but instead of kind of taking that for what it is, we beat ourselves up of, I should have done more, I should have done more, I should have done more.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime that memory comes up, it's, oh, I should have done more. We're beating ourselves up. And when we do something like EMDR, we need to change the way that we think about something so it's more adaptive. And the example that I like to use is, I did the best I could with what I had in the moment. And that, I think, really resonates with a lot of people, especially first responders, of, depending upon the situation and how chaotic it is and the tools that you have available and the team that you have available and just the condition in which the person is in. I think that a lot of people can side with that adaptive, I did the best I could with what I had in that moment. And so it's not that we're taking this memory away. That's not something that, I don't have a magic wand. I don't have that available to me, as much as we all wish that. But what it is that when this memory comes up again, because it certainly will, what will happen is it's going to be less vivid. So it might feel a little bit more dull. Sometimes people talk about it like I've turned down the volume. And the other benefit that people really like is when this memory does come back up, it doesn't bring with it the physiological arousal that it normally does. So normally you might have a racing heart, sweaty hands, sick to your stomach, because maybe that's how you felt in that moment. But when we do EMDR, and normally people tend to feel better within 1 to 3 sessions, that memory can come up, but it doesn't necessarily have to bring with it that physiological change. And it doesn't have to be as vivid and like flashbulb, if you will. Yeah, it's not as intense. Yeah. Exactly. And so, I hope that that's like a good little nutshell for people. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really helpful to unpack because, as I said, it's not come up in the show before, but it is something that I talk about scope of practice on the show quite a bit. And sometimes it surprises people when I'll be in a conversation and I mention referring my clients to therapy, or requiring, for some of my clients, when they start working with me, I require them to also work with a therapist, depending on the type of trauma they bring into the training and coaching relationship. And so I've had a number of clients over the years do EMDR in conjunction with personal training and wellness coaching,
Yeah.
because some of the things that have happened to them in the past were traumatic, and
Hmm.
that trauma was resurfacing as they tried to learn how to take care of themselves.
Yes.
Whether it was specific traumatic events that involved fitness, where, say, a fitness professional caused the trauma,
Hmm.
or it was childhood neglect or abuse around
Yeah.
their bodies. And
Right.
so I think it's so important to me, and I'm so appreciative that this isn't, where we started on sleep, but I think it's really important when we're talking about behavior change and health behavior change and sleep
Hmm.
and movement. So often we're talking about the physical behavior and neglecting that the barrier to change can be psychological,
Oh,
and that
yes.
there are therapeutic tools that are out of the scope of the fitness professional, but are essential to making progress. So yeah, your answer was spot on. And thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that whenever we talk about trauma, and just to put this out there real quick, sometimes we hear about like big T trauma, little T trauma, this, that, and I definitely get this a lot in like the first responder realm of, well, this person went through this, and I only went through this, and they deserve a spot at the wellness, or they deserve a spot
Mm,
with the psychologist more so than I do. And I just think that it's important too that we just name like whatever has happened to you, and you are all equally deserving of feeling as best as you possibly can. It doesn't, we're not competing for whose trauma is the worst, and what
mhm.
the definition of trauma even means. And so I think it's important that we just name that too.
Yeah, I like to say that in the competition of suffering, there are no winners.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the past, we've talked on the show quite a bit about post-traumatic growth. And so for anybody who is interested in some of these ideas we're talking about, and I think one of the things that these somatic trauma therapies really help with is revisiting the meaning making story, because it turns down the intensity. It then
Yes.
gives us an opportunity to revisit the narrative, as you're saying, right? The meaning that we make out of,
Hmm.
well, is it my fault, or did I do the best I could with what I had available? There's a number of first responders
Right.
in my immediate family, volunteer firefighters, all through the family tree. And I work with the Travis Manion Foundation, and they specifically specialize not only in the veteran experience, but in survivorship. And so I spend a lot of time talking to them about post-traumatic growth as well. And so I know a number of them listen to the show. So hi, SLP alumni. And I hope that they hear all of the utility in what you've already shared. There's so many other things I want to talk to you about, though.
Yeah, I know there's
What
so
about
much.
phones? We're going to totally
Phones.
shift gears.
Okay.
Let's talk about phones, because
Yeah.
that is, depending on the age group of the people and the loneliness factor of the people I'm working with, I feel like phones are the enemy of sleep.
Oh,
Tell me
100%.
about that.
Yeah. So, I think for the longest time we had heard about blue light being such an issue, and not to say
Mm,
that it's not, but it's only part of the story. So, whenever it comes to blue light, I think we also need to unpack like why that has been demonized for so long. And the reason is whenever we have blue light, whether that's coming from our screens, our TV, our laptop, our iPad, whatever it is that we're working with, that blue light is the same wavelength as sunlight.
mm-hmm.
And this is problematic because if we think back to our caveman ancestors, which a lot of things that we talk about today still go back to that, because we're still
Yeah.
wired the same way.
Yeah, we
So our
got the same
cave
hardware.
Yeah, we do. We're really due for an upgrade, but this is what we got. So our caveman ancestors knew that it was time to wake up when the sun came up, and they knew that it was time to go to sleep when the sun went down. And that is also, you could call that your circadian rhythm, or your 24-ish hour body clock. And with the invention of lights and having artificial lights anytime we want, that has created, it's thrown quite a wrench
It
in
stimulates us.
our circadian rhythm. Right. It's quite the struggle. And so overhead light is one thing, but whenever we get into blue lights, and whenever we get to the brightness of the screen and how close we're holding it to our face, and maybe otherwise we're in a dark environment and the screen is super bright and all the colors and everything else, it just gets to be really disruptive. So what's happening is the blue light's coming in, it's the same wavelength as sunlight, so the body is thinking, oh, I thought it was bedtime. I'm confused because now I'm having sun coming into my eyes. I'm not really sure. I guess this means it's time to wake up, because light is our strongest cue for kind of entraining this 24-hour body clock. That's why we tell people, whenever you wake up, go look at the sun. We're kind of inadvertently doing that whenever we're holding our phones close up to our eyes. So that's one part of the problem. But the second part of the problem is dopamine. And you might be thinking, well, dopamine, that's not a problem. Okay, but in this context,
At the wrong time, it is.
Yes. Yeah, we have to be very careful with your dopamine. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it is naturally occurring in our body. And so when we do something that's pleasurable or something that our body likes and it wants us to keep doing it, it releases dopamine. And everyone can probably relate to feeling this in some way, but oftentimes things that are addicting also release dopamine. So say, for example, whether you're watching a really great show and it leaves off on a cliffhanger, or you are in the social media debate, or you're just like flipping through all these like funny cat videos, that is releasing dopamine. And dopamine feels really good in the here and now, and it gets us to keep doing whatever more of that activity is because the brain likes it. The problem is sleep has a very hard time competing. One of the things that the CEO of Netflix has said is that their number one competitor is sleep. And so while we know that there are so many benefits that come along with sleep, it's hard to compete right then and there. There's not a whole lot of like immediate gratification that sleep can give you compared to scrolling and continuing to get those hits of dopamine. So that's kind of both sides of the equation here. And as you mentioned, yes, I do think that I think there's another layer of it too, of the society that we live in, the day and age that we live in, how many things are vying for our priority and our attention. And, we have to figure out a way to balance work stuff, personal stuff, family stuff. But what about like the fun me time? Like I also don't want to give that up too. So I think there's just so many things vying for our attention that whenever it gets down to that fun me time or things that I enjoy that are dopamine producing, oftentimes that's happening right before bed or even in bed, that then makes it so much harder to fall asleep and to stay asleep.
And just to add one more layer, now that we've already agitated our whole listener base, is what we're doing on our phone is in there too. Like you mentioned dopamine, but I also think about the way that I see my own feeds having changed in the last, year, 18 months, where the places I used to go for something funny or fun, I'm old, I'm an elder millennial, so I like Imgur, where I used to just go and scroll memes. Yeah. And now so much of it is social and political commentary and these topics that I'm not saying they're not important, but they're just intense. And so the things that I used to do for like a quick chuckle and something to text one of my friends to make them laugh, I'm now also being exposed to these anger, anxiety, rumination inducing topics right before bed.
Exactly. And this is something that I talk to my first responders about, is that oftentimes, especially whenever there are things on the news, this may be a case that you've worked on. This may be something that's hitting close to home. This may be something from like just in your backyard. So not only is it upsetting because nothing on the news is ever super heartwarming. Sometimes it is, but very rarely. That's a very small percentage of what we see. So first and foremost, it's usually just distressing. Then secondly, whenever it comes to my first responders, you might have insider knowledge. You might have information about this that is either wrong or exaggerated or something along the lines. Yeah, you have more pieces of the puzzle than the average watcher. And so it can just get to be very inflammatory, upsetting, overwhelming. And one of the things that I will often ask people to do, and if they do it, they normally have great results, but again, stages of change, is I will prescribe to them a news detox. Yeah. Because again, in our offices, you can't look one way without seeing like a square of 4 different televisions with 4 different news stations broadcasting everything that you might need to know. So if you're not watching the news all the other hours that you're not at work, you will be okay. I promise you. And I agree with you 100%, is that it's almost like walking around on a landmine of, I just want something to lift my mood. I just want something to feel better. I just want something to laugh at. And yet there are all these things that could be very touchy. So that can also, we talked about dopamine and kind of the fun side. And that's kind of what you alluded to of like, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for a laugh, I'm looking for something to share with my friends. But you might also kind of fall down this like sinkhole of like, oh shit,
Oh
I
yeah.
wasn't ready
Oh
for
yeah.
that one.
Yeah. And even for, we do have some listeners who are first responders, who
Mhm.
are military veterans, but even for the people who aren't, I think so much now, especially as our feeds are being curated toward our personal interests, or even what the algorithms think might be overactivating for us, that feeling of I have skin in this game gets heightened, even for those of us who don't have pocket knowledge and insider information.
Yeah.
That feeling of I have a strong opinion and my opinions are justified is partly
Mhm.
because we're being fed things that are going to be like a needle in the eye, right? Like they're meant to get
Yes.
that reaction out of us through pain and suffering and anger. And
Right.
so I
So
love this, like a daily news detox around bed. I
yes.
started doing this myself, where there's a certain hour hits and I only pick up my phone if it's something actually urgent, and I don't open any apps after a certain hour because I know it's designed to give me the hooks and I need the sleep.
You are 100% right. All of those things are designed to be as addicting as they possibly can be, whether it's through, as you said, things that are very upsetting and distressing, or things that are going to keep you going because it's something that the brain likes. But I think that's so important. And I just gave a workshop on sleep and yoga, which is a whole nother
Mm.
ball game, but as yoga is a way to wind down. But nonetheless, I'm reflecting on this because I wanted people to tell me about their wind down routines, what they're doing. And I had someone share about wanting to have this kind of cut off digitally, and knowing that she really struggled with apps and kind of pulling her in. And so she, and I love this, and I'm really going to steal this, is that
Mm.
she has an app, and I cannot remember the name of it. So I apologize, but I'm sure that there are several out there now that will cut off like
Mhm.
at whatever specific time. It cuts it off. She cannot get into any of the social media apps or any other ones that she desires. You kind of pick and choose. But she said what was really the kicker was she doesn't have the password to kind of override it. Because I think a lot of people
Oh, yeah.
will
That's
think,
where I've
oh,
suffered
no,
in
it's
the
okay.
past.
5 more minutes, 10 more minutes. I'll just type in the password and I'll overwrite it. So she doesn't have the password. Her partner does. And I thought, oh, wow, that is
Yeah.
really the ticket of if you're serious about this, that's a great way to go.
Yeah. Or I'm going to say your coach. Give it to your coach
Give
because
it to your
we
coach.
won't give it to you. Uh, yeah, I think that's great in terms of, just whatever strategies we can use. What I'm hearing is lowering light intensity, the
Mhm.
proximity to bed, and then
Mhm.
also having some strategies so that we're not overstimulating ourselves, over activating, whether
Yes.
it's for giggles or for struggle, too close to bed, because that overstimulation is part of the recipe that a lot of people are struggling with.
Yes, and that's something that I hear. Probably one of the most common complaints is I am so busy all day long. I go to lay down, I put my head on the pillow. I am so exhausted. And yet, this is whenever my mind starts to go and it wants to run
Mm.
wild and it wants to think about all these things. And we've all been there, whether that's your nightly struggle or it happens every now and again. And it is incredibly frustrating and upsetting, and you feel very helpless about it. And that's all also why I think it's so important for us to have some type of wind down routine. I mentioned this earlier, we're go, go, go all day long, all the priorities and things that are vying for our attention. And we want the easiest possible solution of just to fall face first into bed, and that's it. And we're out for 8 hours. And that's just simply not how it works for most people. If that does work for you, you may be sleep deprived. That's a whole nother like rabbit hole for us to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
down.
yeah. I
But
remember learning that about myself because I was somebody who, one, I could fall asleep anywhere. Like
mhm,
as an adolescent, I would fall asleep in the weirdest places, until I fell asleep behind the wheel and nearly
yes,
died in a car accident. And then
yes.
that was the age, I was 17 at the time, and learned, oh, you're supposed to have a couple of minutes that you
Mhm,
fall into sleep. And
yes.
I had, as long as I can remember, I would collapse into bed and immediately be out. And I remember being like, that's not how this works. And then having like my literal wake up, rude awakening of nearly dying. And that's what it took to convince me to learn about sleep a little better.
And thank you for sharing that
Hard
story because, and I think that a lot of people hear things, but they're like, oh no, it's fine. Or like, no, that's not me. And I think hearing stories like that of, oh, but actually that could happen to me. That could happen to anybody. And taking it seriously, because when you don't allow your body to sleep will be forced, and it will come whether you like it or not.
And I did not like it. And I'll also say to your comments about awareness and stages of change. So that was when I was 17 and I started getting like 7-ish hours a night and thought like, oh, this is enough. This is fine. And it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that my schedule worked out, because fitness professionals, we're notorious for not having a schedule that is good for sleep, because we're up so early to train people before work. And then you have the whole day, and then you have more clients at night just to make a living. And it is not until you're a few years into your career that you have enough load of clients that you can fill out the middle of the day and actually live like a normal human. So by the time I got into my 30s and I had that established client base, I had a career and started to get real, regular, like entrained sleep. And I realized that I was smarter. I'm way more clever. I have much better recall.
Your IQ is going to go through the roof.
I'm more generative with my creativity. I'm better for my clients. I remember things better. I literally feel smarter when I sleep.
And you have to have experiences like that in order to then realize when things aren't going well. And I think that just not enough people have that experience of that good sleep, and to have experiences like what you just talked about, because it's true. Again, sleep touches everything. And if you're not giving yourself the chance to sleep, your body kind of becomes used to this, I don't want to say like dumber you and like less clever you and less creative you.
To it.
Yeah, but it becomes the new normal.
Yeah, because the body and the mind will adapt to the most consistent stimulus we give them, right? Just like you don't notice the hum of your refrigerator. And I think there's a lot of people, to your point, around, I 4 hours of sleep. I can do it.
I'm good on it.
I've been doing it my whole life. I'll sleep. I'll sleep when I retire. Imagine what those people would be capable of.
Honestly, though.
Slept. Yeah. So many of us.
It would be unbelievable.
There were so many other things that I wanted to share with our listeners, but I think instead what we'll share with them is the name of your book one more time.
Let's do it.
If Sleep Were a Drug, You Couldn't Afford It. There it is.
Here it is. Yeah, I'm the author. My name is Dr. Leah Kaylor. I wrote If Sleep Were a Drug. This is, you will see it says the first responder edition. However, anyone can pick it up. Anyone can read it. Anyone can benefit. And that's really what it's all about. Is I took my about 7 years of knowledge and I put it all down in a very thick book, but it's also meant to be this timeless resource of maybe you're having sleep issues now. You read the book, you put the tips into practice, things are going well. And then maybe 2 or 3 years from now, a different type of sleep issue crops up. Take it off your shelf, dust it off, and use it as a troubleshooting manual, because that is one of the many reasons why I wrote it.
And maybe you'll feel smarter along the way. Dr. Leah, where else could our listeners find you?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Leah Kaylor. That's the name of my website. That's where you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where you can find me on social media. So everywhere I am Dr. Leah Kaylor.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.
Ditto. And of course, listeners, we always want to hear your feedback. So you can email me. It is info@darlene.coach. My Instagram is darlene.coach. My website, wait for it, it's darlene.coach. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you're a fan of the show, I hope you've already subscribed. Thank you to everybody who's left us a 5-star review. Maybe you could do that too. Sharing is always caring. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves and be well.